For nearly 7 years, the Kingdom of Silver Fang had known nothing but peace under the rule of Alpha King Zevian and his Luna, Nyra. Their love story had become legendary across every neighboring kingdom. Traveling merchants sang songs about the Alpha King who never attended a royal banquet without his Luna by his side. Visiting rulers admired the way Zevian looked at Nyra, not with the cold authority of a king, but with the quiet devotion of a man who had found the love of his life. Nyra was equally admired. She possessed neither arrogance nor pride, despite wearing the kingdom's most precious crown. She preferred walking through the capital with only a few guards, greeting merchants by name, helping struggling families, and spending hours speaking with ordinary citizens. The people often joked that while Zevian ruled the kingdom with strength, Nyra ruled it with kindness. Together they had created a balance that made Silver Fang stronger than it had ever been. Every evening, after the royal council meetings ended, Zevian escaped the formalities of palace life and joined Nyra in the western gardens. The gardens overlooked a crystal lake where hundreds of white moon lilies bloomed throughout the year. It was their favorite place in the entire kingdom, because it was where Zevian had first confessed his love years earlier. One cool autumn evening, Nyra was sitting beside the lake, reading an old book, when she heard familiar footsteps behind her. Before she could turn around, strong arms gently wrapped around her waist. "I knew I'd find you here," Zevian whispered. Nyra smiled without looking back. "You always do." He rested his chin on her shoulder. "I've searched battlefields with thousands of soldiers. Finding my Luna in one garden isn't exactly difficult." She laughed softly before closing her book. "You only say that because you know all my favorite places." "No," Zevian replied. "I know my favorite person." Nyra rolled her eyes playfully. "You've become far too charming, and whose fault is that?" "Mine." "Exactly." The two laughed together as the evening breeze carried the scent of moon lilies across the lake. Neither of them noticed the pair of eyes watching them from the shadows beyond the garden wall. Hidden beneath a black hood stood a lone figure. His face remained concealed, but his voice was filled with hatred. "You'll never have your happy ending." The stranger quietly disappeared into the darkness. 3 days later, Silver Fang welcomed delegates from 5 neighboring kingdoms to celebrate the annual Moon Alliance festival. The palace had never looked more magnificent. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand ballroom, while musicians performed throughout the evening. Nobles danced beneath banners representing every allied kingdom. As king and queen, Zevian and Nyra greeted each guest personally. The celebration continued peacefully until shortly before midnight. A palace servant suddenly rushed into the ballroom, his face pale with fear. "My king, the Eastern Watchtower has sent an urgent message." Zevian immediately excused himself from the celebration. "I'll return shortly." Nyra smiled. "I'll be waiting." He gently kissed her hand before following the messenger. It would be the last moment Zevian remembered. As he entered the palace corridor leading toward the council chamber, the hallway was strangely empty. Too empty. Years of battle had sharpened his instincts. Something felt wrong. Before he could react, a masked assassin dropped from the ceiling. Steel flashed beneath the torchlight. Zevian drew his sword instantly. The two exchanged several powerful blows before another attacker emerged from the shadows. Then another, and another. It wasn't an assassination attempt. It was an ambush. Zevian fought with everything he had. One by one the attackers fell. But just as he defeated the final assassin, a hidden crossbow fired from the darkness. The bolt struck the side of his head. The impact sent him crashing down the palace staircase. His body hit the marble floor below with terrifying force. Everything went black. The palace erupted into chaos. Guards flooded the corridors. Nyra was the first to reach him. She dropped to her knees beside her unconscious mate. gently lifting his head into her lap. "Zevian." There was no response. Blood slowly stained the white sleeves of her gown. "No." She looked desperately toward the guards. "Call everyone." The healer arrived within minutes. After examining the Alpha King, his expression grew unusually serious. "The wound isn't fatal." Nyra sighed in relief. "But," the old healer hesitated, "the injury to his head is severe." "What does that mean?" The healer looked directly into Nyra's eyes. "If he survives, he may not remember who he is." Nyra felt the world stop around her. She tightened her grip on Zevian's hand. "No. He has to remember. He has to." The hours that followed became the longest night in Queen Nyra's life. Outside the royal infirmary, the palace corridors remained unusually silent, despite being filled with guards, servants, and members of the royal council. No one dared to speak above a whisper. Every face carried the same expression of fear, because everyone understood what the Alpha King meant to Silver Fang. Zevian was more than a ruler. He was the shield that had protected the kingdom from countless enemies. If anything happened to him, neighboring kingdoms would see weakness, and weakness always invited war. Inside the infirmary, the royal healers worked tirelessly through the night. Rare herbs were crushed into medicine. Enchanted bandages soaked in healing oils were wrapped around the deep wound on Zevian's head. And the palace's oldest physicians took turns watching over him. Nyra never left his side. She remained seated beside his bed, gently holding his hand, as though letting go would somehow allow death to claim him. Every now and then, she brushed his dark hair away from his face, remembering how only a few hours earlier he had been laughing with her in the palace ballroom. It was difficult to believe that the confident Alpha King, who had danced with her beneath the crystal chandeliers, now lay completely motionless. Just before sunrise, the elderly royal healer slowly approached Nyra. His face showed the exhaustion of a man who had fought through the entire night to save a life. "My queen," he said softly, "his condition has stabilized." Nyra closed her eyes in relief, thanking the moon goddess under her breath. "But," the healer hesitated, "the injury has caused severe trauma to his memory. We cannot predict how much he will remember when he wakes. He may recognize everyone, he may recognize no one." Nyra looked back at Zevian, her heart aching with fear. "What if he doesn't remember me?" The old healer sighed. "Then you must help him remember." Those simple words remained in Nyra's thoughts for the rest of the day. Hours passed. The palace remained unusually quiet as nobles gathered outside, awaiting news of their king. Ronan, Zevian's loyal beta and closest friend since childhood, refused to leave the corridor outside the infirmary. Every servant who passed him noticed the same thing. The usually fearless warrior looked genuinely frightened. Late that afternoon, one of the healers suddenly rushed toward the queen. "My queen!" His fingers moved. Nyra immediately stood and hurried into the room. She barely reached the bedside before Zevian slowly opened his eyes. For several seconds, he simply stared at the ceiling, as though trying to understand where he was. His breathing remained calm, but confusion slowly appeared on his face. The room around him seemed unfamiliar. Nyra gently reached for his hand. "Zevian." He slowly turned toward the sound of her voice. Their eyes met. Nyra smiled through tears. "You woke up." For a brief moment she believed everything would be fine. Then Zevian frowned slightly. His voice was weak but clear. "Who are you?" The words struck Nyra harder than any blade ever could. She stared at him in disbelief. Her lips trembled. "It's me. I'm Nyra." He continued looking at her politely, but without recognition. "I'm sorry. I don't remember you." The room became unbearably silent. Ronan stepped forward. "My king." Zevian turned toward him. "You know me. I'm Ronan. We've fought together since we were boys." Zevian studied his face for several moments before shaking his head. I'm sorry, I don't remember you either. One by one, members of the Royal Council entered the room. Every face received the same response. The palace healer, the captain of the guards, the royal advisors, even the elderly librarian who had taught Zevian as a child. None of them were familiar to him. His memories had vanished completely. The healer quietly led everyone outside, leaving only Nyra inside the room. She stood beside the window, silently wiping away tears she didn't want Zevian to see. After several minutes, he spoke again. I can tell you're important to me. Nyra turned toward him. Why do you say that? Because when I saw you crying, he placed a hand over his chest. My heart hurt. Nyra smiled sadly. That's because, she paused, struggling to control her emotions. I'm your wife. Zevian's eyes widened. My wife? She nodded. We've been married for 7 years. He looked around the room once more, before returning his gaze to her. I wish I could remember. Do I? All the memories came back, despite the pain filling her heart. But memories can return. But I say to them, we'll face this together. Although he remembered nothing, something about Nyra made him feel strangely safe. Her voice calmed him. Her presence eased the fear inside him. It was a feeling he couldn't explain. Yet not everyone inside the palace was saddened by the Alpha King's condition. Hidden inside a private chamber deep beneath the western tower, the mysterious cloaked figure who had watched Zevian in the gardens days earlier quietly smiled. The first part of the plan is complete. Another man standing beside him frowned. What if the king remembers? The cloaked figure chuckled. He won't. And even if he does, his smile slowly widened. I'll make sure he never trusts his own Luna again. The game had only just begun. The following days were more painful for Nyra than she could ever have imagined. Although Zevian had survived the assassination attempt, it often felt as though she had lost him all the same. Every morning she entered his chamber with hope in her heart, praying that he would suddenly remember the life they had built together. Yet every morning began the same way. Zevian greeted her politely, thanked her for caring for him, and treated her with the kindness he would offer any respected guest. There was warmth in his voice, but it was not the warmth of a husband. It was the kindness of a stranger. The palace healers remained optimistic, insisting that memory could return unexpectedly. Sometimes it happened after days. Sometimes it took months. In rare cases, a familiar place, a treasured object, or a powerful emotional experience could awaken forgotten memories. Clinging to that small hope, Nyra devoted herself to helping Zevian rediscover the life that had been stolen from him. She began by taking him through the palace one room at a time. Instead of overwhelming him with stories, she allowed him to experience each place naturally. They visited the royal library, where Zevian had spent countless nights studying military history before becoming king. They walked through the grand throne room, where he had been crowned before thousands of cheering citizens. They even climbed to the highest balcony overlooking the capital, where they had stood together on the evening of their coronation. This view used to be your favorite, Nyra said quietly as the morning breeze swept across the city below. Whenever the burden of ruling became too heavy, you came here to remind yourself who you were protecting. Zevian rested his hands on the stone railing and gazed over the kingdom stretching toward the distant mountains. The streets below were already busy with merchants opening their shops, children chasing each other through the market square, and soldiers changing shifts along the city walls. It's beautiful, he admitted. It always was. He glanced toward Nyra. I wish it felt familiar. She smiled gently. One day, it will. Although Zevian could not remember the balcony, something about standing beside Nyra filled him with an unexplainable sense of peace. He found himself enjoying her company more than anyone else's. Whenever she entered the room, the uneasiness inside him seemed to fade. He couldn't understand why. His mind insisted she was a stranger, yet his heart reacted as though it had known her forever. That evening, while Nyra prepared tea in the palace garden, Zevian found himself watching her from a distance. She moved gracefully among the blooming moon lilies, occasionally stopping to trim a flower or straighten a vine. There was nothing extraordinary about what she was doing, yet he couldn't take his eyes off her. Ronan approached quietly and stood beside him. "You've been staring at her for nearly 10 minutes. Zevian looked away, slightly embarrassed. "I don't know why." Ronan smiled faintly. "Your memory may be gone." He folded his arms. "But your heart clearly remembers something." Zevian frowned thoughtfully. "Whenever she's near," he searched for the right words, "I feel safe." Ronan's smile grew. "You always did." Before Zevian could ask what he meant, one of the palace servants hurried into the garden. "My king, the council is waiting." Zevian nodded, before following the servant, but as he walked away, he glanced back one last time toward Nyra. She looked up at exactly the same moment. Their eyes met briefly before he disappeared inside the palace. Nyra noticed the look. For the first time since the accident, she saw curiosity instead of emptiness. It gave her hope. Unfortunately, someone else noticed it too. Hidden behind one of the marble pillars overlooking the garden stood Lord Cassian, the kingdom's newly appointed royal advisor. Since the attack, he had quietly assumed many responsibilities while Zevian recovered. To the rest of the kingdom, Cassian appeared loyal, intelligent, and deeply concerned for the Alpha King's well-being. In reality, he was the man behind the assassination. Months earlier, Cassian had secretly allied himself with a rival kingdom that had long envied Silver Fang's prosperity. He knew Zevian was too powerful to defeat in open battle, so he chose a different strategy. Destroy the king's memories. Separate him from the one person who always guided his heart. Then slowly fill the empty spaces in his mind with carefully crafted lies. Watching Zevian and Nyra grow closer again filled Cassian with quiet anger. "This isn't happening," he muttered under his breath. He should be drifting farther away from her, not closer. That night, Cassian put the next stage of his plan into motion. While most of the palace slept, he entered the royal archives using a master key that only senior advisors possessed. Inside were hundreds of paintings, journals, letters, and historical records documenting Zevian and Nyra's years together. One by one, Cassian removed every personal record connecting the king and queen. Portraits disappeared from the walls. Letters vanished from locked drawers. Their wedding painting was taken from the royal gallery. Every trace of their shared history was carefully hidden. By dawn, it was almost as if their love story had never existed. The following morning, Zevian wandered into the gallery after breakfast. The large walls displayed portraits of former kings, queens, and great warriors. He walked slowly through the hall, studying each painting with quiet curiosity. Finally, he turned toward Nyra. "You said we've been married for 7 years." "Yes." He looked around the gallery once more. "Then why isn't there a single portrait of us together?" Nyra stopped walking. Her smile slowly disappeared. Just yesterday, there had been dozens. She immediately understood. Someone inside the palace was erasing their past, and whoever had tried to kill Zevian hadn't finished playing their game. Nyra stood motionless in the royal gallery, her eyes slowly scanning the empty walls where the paintings had once hung. Just yesterday, this hall had displayed the story of their lives together. There had been the portrait of their wedding beneath the moon goddess temple, another of Zevian crowning her as queen before the people of Silver Fang, and dozens more painted during festivals, victories, and royal celebrations. Now, every one of them was gone. Only portraits of former rulers remained. It was as though someone wanted to erase her existence from Zevian's life. She turned toward one of the palace attendants. "Who removed the paintings?" The young servant looked confused. "My queen, I don't know. They were here yesterday." Within minutes, the captain of the palace guards was summoned. He questioned every servant responsible for maintaining the gallery. No one had seen anything. No one remembered giving permission. No one had entered during the night. It made no sense. Yet the paintings had vanished without a trace. Zevian quietly watched everyone's reactions. Although he had no memories of the missing portraits, he could clearly see the pain on Nyra's face. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "I didn't mean to upset you." Nyra forced a smile. "You didn't." She looked once more at the empty walls. Someone else did. That afternoon, Nyra personally searched the palace archives. Every cabinet that had once held personal letters between herself and Zevian was empty. Their wedding documents had disappeared. Their travel journals were gone. Even the small wooden box where Zevian had kept every letter Nyra had ever written to him had vanished. Only one thing remained: a single dried white moon lily pressed between the pages of an old book. Nyra carefully picked it up. She smiled sadly. "I remember this," she whispered. Years earlier, during their first spring together as husband and wife, Zevian had secretly placed the flower inside her favorite book, while teasing her about always losing bookmarks. She had laughed for nearly an hour after finding it. Now, it was the only physical memory left of those happy days. She gently closed her hand around the fragile flower. "I won't let them erase us," she said. Elsewhere, inside the palace, Lord Cassian stood inside his private study, watching workers quietly carry crates toward an underground storage chamber. Inside those crates, every stolen painting, every missing journal, every letter, every memory. One of his trusted followers entered the room. "My lord, what if the queen discovers where you've hidden them?" Cassian smiled confidently. "She won't. And even if she does," he poured himself a glass of wine, "the king won't believe her." A man nodded. The next phase, Cassian's expression darkened. "Now we destroy what remains." The following morning, Zevian awoke before sunrise. Sleep had become difficult since the accident. Although he couldn't explain why, strange dreams haunted him every night. He never saw faces clearly. Only fragments. A woman laughing beneath falling cherry blossoms. A silver ring slipping onto someone's finger. The sound of wedding bells. A voice softly whispering, "You'll never face tomorrow alone." Every time he tried to remember the face behind the voice, the dream ended. He sat up slowly, rubbing his temples. His head still ached from the injury. A knock came at the door. "My king, come in." Lord Cassian entered, carrying several official documents. "I apologize for disturbing your morning." Zevian gestured toward the chair. "What is it?" Cassian sat down. "There are matters concerning the kingdom that require your attention." He placed reports across the table. Trade agreements, border patrols, military inspections. Zevian nodded. "I'll review them." Cassian hesitated before speaking again. "There is another matter." "What is it?" Cassian lowered his voice. "I hesitate to mention this because I don't wish to burden your majesty." Zevian frowned. "Go on." Cassian sighed. "Since your accident, there have been rumors." "What kind of rumors?" "Some members of the court fear the queen may be taking advantage of your condition." Zevian's expression hardened. "What do you mean?" Cassian spoke carefully, choosing every word. "They worry that because you cannot remember your past, someone could simply tell you any story." He leaned forward. "I am not accusing Her Majesty. I merely suggest caution. The seed had been planted. Later that day, Nyra found Zevian standing alone in the western gardens, the same place where they had spent countless evenings together. She smiled softly. "I thought I'd find you here." Zevian returned the smile. "I suppose I like this place." "You always have." They began walking beside the lake in comfortable silence. After several minutes, Nyra pointed toward an old oak tree. "Do you see that carving?" Zevian walked closer. Near the base of the trunk, 2 initials, Z plus N, a small crescent moon. "You carved this?" he asked. Nyra laughed quietly. "No, you did. I spent an entire afternoon scolding you because you damaged the tree. And what happened? You kissed me, and somehow convinced me not to stay angry." Zevian couldn't help smiling. "I must have been very persuasive." "You were." For a brief moment, everything felt peaceful. Then suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Zevian's head. He grabbed the tree for support. Images flashed before his eyes. The same tree, the same lake, Nyra laughing, him chasing her through the flowers, her falling into his arms, a kiss beneath the moonlight. The memories appeared for only a heartbeat, then vanished again. Zevian stumbled backward. Nyra immediately caught him. "Zevian." He stared at her, breathing heavily. His voice shook. "I've seen this place before." Hope filled Nyra's eyes. "What did you remember?" "I saw—" He pressed a hand against his forehead. "You." She stepped closer. "What else?" "I don't know. It disappeared." "But—" He looked directly into her eyes. "I remember being happy." A tear rolled down Nyra's cheek. It was the first memory. Small, fragile, but real. Far across the garden, hidden behind the marble columns, Lord Cassian watched the entire scene unfold. His smile disappeared. "This is happening too quickly." He clenched his fists. "If his memories continue returning, everything I've planned will fall apart." For the first time, Cassian realized he wasn't simply fighting a king. He was fighting a love strong enough to survive even forgotten memories. Nyra could hardly believe what she had just witnessed. It had only lasted a few seconds, but those few seconds had filled her heart with more hope than she had felt since the night of the attack. Zevian had remembered something. Not a name, not a conversation, but a feeling. He had remembered happiness, and in that memory, she had been there with him. As they slowly walked back toward the palace, Zevian remained unusually quiet. His hand occasionally drifted toward the side of his head, where the scar from the crossbow bolt remained hidden beneath his dark hair. Every few steps, another faint image flashed across his mind, before disappearing again, like mist beneath the morning sun. He couldn't understand it. The memories refused to stay. Whenever he tried to hold on to them, they slipped away before he could recognize the faces or hear the voices clearly. That evening, after supper, Nyra entered the royal library, carrying a large leather-bound album. Dust covered its edges, evidence that it had not been opened for years. She carefully placed it on the table in front of Zevian. "I found something." He looked at the old book curiously. "What is it?" "Our sketchbook." "Our?" She nodded. Before painters could finish large royal portraits, they always made rough sketches. She slowly opened the album. Inside were dozens of charcoal drawings. Some showed Zevian practicing swordsmanship. Others showed Nyra reading beneath the palace gardens. Many simply captured ordinary moments that no official portrait had ever displayed. Zevian studied each page carefully. On one drawing, he was sitting beside the lake, while Nyra secretly placed a flower crown on his head. Another showed them laughing after being caught in a summer rainstorm. A third captured Zevian asleep in the royal library, while Nyra quietly covered him with her own cloak. Without realizing it, He smiled. They look, he paused. Happy. Nyra's eyes softened. We were. She reached another page. This one showed Zevian kneeling before Nyra beneath the moon goddess temple. Although the sketch contained no color, the emotion on both faces was unmistakable. What happened here? Zevian asked. Nyra looked at the drawing for several seconds before answering. This, she smiled gently, was the day you proposed. Zevian stared at the sketch. Something stirred deep inside him. He closed his eyes. A voice echoed faintly inside his mind. Nyra, if the moon goddess grants me only one blessing in this lifetime, let it be you. His breathing suddenly became uneven. He grabbed the edge of the table. Nyra immediately stood. Zevian? I heard. His voice trembled. I heard someone speaking. What did they say? He looked at her in confusion. I think, he frowned. I think it was me. Nyra felt her heart race. Do you remember? I don't know. I only heard a sentence. What sentence? He slowly repeated the words. If the moon goddess grants me only one blessing, let it be you. No one else had been there. No servant. No guard. No noble. Those were the exact words Zevian had spoken on the day he proposed. No one else had been there. No servant. No guard. No noble. Only the two of them. There was no way anyone else could have told him. For the first time, a forgotten memory had returned completely on its own. Unfortunately, someone else heard every word. Standing outside the library door, Lord Cassian. His expression darkened. This cannot continue. He quietly walked away before anyone noticed him. Moments later, he entered a hidden chamber beneath the western tower. Waiting inside were 3 cloaked assassins. The king is remembering. One of the assassins looked surprised. So soon? Cassian nodded. Much sooner than expected. What are your orders? Cassian's eyes became cold. If memories bring him back to the queen, then we'll give him new memories instead. The assassins exchanged uncertain glances. How? Cassian opened a small wooden chest resting on the table. Inside lay several blood-stained pieces of cloth, a broken silver bracelet, and a royal dagger bearing Nyra's family crest. One assassin frowned. What is all this? Cassian smiled. Evidence. Tomorrow, the Alpha King will remember exactly what I want him to remember. The following morning began peacefully. Nyra joined Zevian for breakfast on the eastern balcony overlooking the capital. For the first time since the accident, their conversation felt almost natural. Zevian even laughed at one of Nyra's playful jokes. The palace servants smiled quietly. Seeing their king laugh again filled everyone with hope. The doors burst open. Lord Cassian hurried onto the balcony, breathing heavily. My king, what happened? Cassian looked deeply troubled. I didn't wish to burden your majesty, but while organizing the royal archives, we discovered something. He carefully placed a sealed wooden box on the table. What is it? I believe, he hesitated. These belong to the night of your attack. Zevian slowly opened the box. Inside, his eyes immediately settled on the royal dagger. Something flashed through his mind. A corridor, shouting, steel. Then, a woman holding that same dagger. His breathing quickened, his vision blurred. Another memory exploded inside his head. This time, he saw Nyra, standing over him, blood on her hands, holding the dagger. His eyes flew open. He pushed himself away from the table so suddenly that his chair crashed onto the marble floor. Nyra stared at him in shock. Zevian? He looked at her, not with confusion, not with kindness, but with fear. You! His voice barely escaped his lips. Were you there that night? Nyra froze. Of course I was. I found you after the attack. But Zevian's mind was already battling 2 different realities. One memory told him Nyra had always loved him. Another showed her standing over his wounded body with blood on her hands. Tell which one was real. And somewhere deep beneath the palace, Lord Cassian smiled. The most dangerous weapon in the world wasn't a sword. It was a lie, hidden inside a broken memory. The silence that settled over the eastern balcony was suffocating. Nyra stared at Zevian in disbelief. Only a few minutes earlier, they had been sharing breakfast together, laughing over a memory he had almost remembered. Now, his silver eyes were filled with uncertainty. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't anger. It was something far more frightening. Doubt. Lord Cassian quietly lowered his head, carefully hiding the satisfaction on his face. "My king," he said in a concerned voice, "perhaps the injury is causing painful memories to return out of order. The royal healer did warn us that recovered memories might be confusing." Zevian never took his eyes off Nyra. "I remember seeing you." Nyra stepped forward slowly. "Yes, I was there. You were unconscious. I held you until the healers arrived." Zevian shook his head. "No, I remember blood. There was blood everywhere. There was blood on your hands." Nyra looked down at her trembling fingers. "They were covered in your blood because I was trying to stop the bleeding." Cassian spoke gently, almost as though he were trying to calm the king. "Your Majesty, no one is accusing the Queen. I simply believe we should allow the healers to examine these memories before making any conclusions." The words sounded reasonable. That was exactly why they were dangerous. Cassian never openly accused Nyra. He merely encouraged Zevian to question his own art. The royal healer was summoned immediately. After listening carefully to Zevian's description, the old man remained thoughtful for several moments. "My king." He chose his words carefully. "Head injuries often cause memories to return in fragments. You may remember an event, but misunderstand the order in which it happened." Zevian frowned. "What do you mean?" The healer continued. "If your Majesty remembers seeing the Queen holding a blood-stained dagger, that does not necessarily mean she attacked you. It could simply mean she picked up the weapon after the attackers fled." Nyra silently thanked the old healer. Finally, someone understood. But Zevian remained troubled. "I don't know what to believe." The healer placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Then don't force yourself. The truth is patient. It doesn't disappear simply because memory is slow." That afternoon, Nyra wandered alone through the western gardens. For the first time since Zevian awakened, she felt afraid. Not because he no longer loved her. She could still see kindness in his eyes. She was afraid because someone inside the palace was manipulating every memory that returned to him. This wasn't happening by chance. Someone wanted Zevian to remember lies. She stopped beneath the old oak tree where their initials were carved into the bark. Running her fingers gently across the faded letters, she whispered, "I won't lose you. I've already fought too hard." Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned. "Ronan." The Beta bowed respectfully before speaking. "My queen, you look worried." Nyra managed a faint smile. "I am." Ronan looked toward the palace. "I've known Zevian since we were children. If there's one thing I know, it's that his heart has never lied." Nyra sighed. "But his mind is." Ronan nodded. "Exactly." He stepped closer. "So instead of waiting for his memories, we'll find the person changing them." Nyra looked at him. "You think someone inside the palace is responsible?" "I don't think. I know." That evening, while the palace prepared for dinner, Ronan secretly began his own investigation. Unlike the royal guards, he trusted very few people. Instead of questioning servants publicly, he spoke to them individually. One kitchen maid remembered seeing Lord Cassian walking through the palace long after midnight. A stable boy claimed he had delivered locked wooden crates to the Western Tower. An elderly cleaner admitted she had noticed several royal portraits disappearing shortly after Cassian became responsible for organizing the palace archives. Individually, the information seemed harmless. Together, it painted a disturbing picture. Someone had been quietly removing every reminder of Nyra from Zevian's life. Ronan immediately reported everything to Nyra. She listened carefully before asking one simple question. What lies beneath the Western Tower? Ronan became unusually quiet. Storage chambers, old prison cells, and, he hesitated, the forgotten royal archives. Nyra's eyes widened. The missing paintings, they could still be there. Late that night, after the palace had fallen asleep, Nyra and Ronan quietly made their way toward the Western Tower. Only a single lantern illuminated the narrow stone staircase leading underground. The air grew colder with every step. Cobwebs covered the walls. No one had entered these tunnels for years. Finally, they reached an old iron door. It was locked. Ronan drew a small steel tool from his pocket. Within seconds, the lock clicked open. The heavy door slowly creaked inward. Both froze. The room was enormous, and inside, hundreds of royal paintings stood stacked against the walls. Large wooden crates overflowed with journals, letters, official records, and family heirlooms. Everything that connected Zevian and Nyra's life together had been hidden there. Nyra slowly walked toward the nearest painting. She brushed away the dust. It was their wedding portrait, the very one that had disappeared from the gallery. Tears filled her eyes. They were never destroyed. They were hidden. Ronan looked around the chamber. This proved someone wanted the king to forget. Suddenly, a slow clap echoed through the darkness. Both turned. Standing in the doorway, Lord Cassian. He smiled calmly. I was wondering how long it would take you to find this place. Behind him, 6 armed soldiers stepped into the chamber. Every one of them wore the royal crest of Silver Fang, but the cold expressions on their faces revealed the truth. They no longer served the kingdom. They served Cassian. Cassian folded his hands behind his back. I really hoped you would stop searching. He smiled at Nyra. But unfortunately, you've remembered too much. The soldiers slowly raised their swords. The iron door slammed shut behind them. And for the first time since the conspiracy began, Nyra and Ronan realized they had walked directly into a trap. The underground chamber fell silent. Only the sound of dripping water echoed through the darkness, as Nyra and Ronan faced Lord Cassian and the 6 armed soldiers surrounding them. Cassian's smile never faded. I truly underestimated both of you. He slowly walked toward the wedding portrait, resting against the wall. You know, he gently brushed dust from the painted image of Zevian and Nyra. I almost destroyed these, but then I realized they would become far more useful. Nyra stood protectively in front of Ronan. You planned everything. Cassian nodded proudly. From the very beginning. The assassins, the missing portraits, the false memories, the forged evidence. He laughed softly. The crossbow bolt wasn't meant to kill Zevian. It was meant to erase him. Ronan tightened his grip on his sword. Why? Cassian's expression suddenly turned cold. Because I served Zevian's father. I watched him build this kingdom. And when the old king died, he looked toward the ceiling. Everyone celebrated his son. They forgot me. They forgot the man who built half this palace. His eyes burned with jealousy. I deserved the throne. Nyra shook her head. You wanted power. No. Cassian smiled bitterly. I wanted recognition. He looked toward the soldiers. Kill them. Steel flashed through the darkness. The first soldier charged Ronan. Their swords collided with a deafening crash. Another rushed toward Nyra. Although she wasn't a trained warrior like Zevian, she had spent years learning palace defense techniques. She grabbed an old spear leaning against the wall and blocked the attack just in time. The underground chamber erupted into battle. Ronan defeated one soldier, then another. Nyra narrowly avoided a blade that sliced through her cloak. Cassian calmly watched the fight. Everything was still going according to plan. Until a powerful roar echoed through the tunnels. Every soldier froze. Cassian slowly turned. The iron door exploded inward. Standing beneath the torchlight was Alpha King Zevian. His silver eyes burned with fury. Behind him stood dozens of royal guards. No one moved. Cassian frowned. "You weren't supposed to find this place." Zevian stepped forward. "I remembered." Cassian laughed. "Impossible. The memories I gave you should have buried the truth." Zevian's voice became calm. "They almost did." He looked toward Nyra. "But every false memory disappeared whenever I looked into her eyes." Cassian's confidence finally began to crack. Zevian continued walking toward him. "I remembered the first flower she ever gave me. The promise we made beneath the moon goddess temple. The night I asked her to become my Luna." He smiled gently at Nyra. "I remembered how impossible it is for her to betray me." Nyra's eyes filled with tears. He remembered everything. Cassian suddenly drew a hidden dagger. "If I can't have the throne, neither of you will." He lunged toward Nyra. Before anyone could react, Zevian stepped between them. The impact echoed throughout the chamber. Cassian attacked again and again. Years ago he had been one of Silver Fang's finest warriors. Even now, he was dangerous. The duel carried them across the underground chamber. Steel rang against steel. Neither man spoke. Finally, Cassian attempted one last desperate strike. Zevian sidestepped smoothly. With a single powerful movement, he knocked Cassian's sword from his hand. The blade skidded across the stone floor. Cassian dropped to his knees. It was over. Royal guards immediately surrounded him. As chains were fastened around his wrists, Cassian looked up at Zevian. "I erased your memories. I made you doubt everything. How did you remember?" Zevian looked toward Nyra, then smiled. "Because memories live here." He placed his hand over his heart. "Not only here. You could fool my mind, but you could never fool my soul." 3 days later, the entire royal court gathered inside the throne room. Every noble, every commander, every advisor, even citizens from across the kingdom had been invited. Lord Cassian stood in chains before everyone. One by one, his crimes were read aloud. Conspiracy against the crown, attempted murder of the Alpha King, treason, manipulation of royal records, destroying state property, hiring assassins, framing the queen. When the final charge was read, complete silence filled the hall. Cassian lowered his head. "I confess." Gasps spread throughout the court. The truth had finally been revealed. After the guards removed Cassian from the throne room, Zevian slowly walked toward Nyra. Thousands of eyes watched them. For several moments, neither spoke. To everyone's surprise, the Alpha King knelt. The entire court gasped. Kings did not kneel, yet Zevian lowered his head before his queen. "My Luna." His voice trembled. "When I forgot my memories, you fought to bring them back. When I doubted myself, you believed in me. When lies surrounded us, you never stopped protecting me." He closed his eyes. "I failed you. I should have trusted my heart sooner. I cannot erase your pain, but if you'll allow me, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure no shadow ever stands between us again." The throne room became completely silent. Nyra slowly stepped forward, She gently touched his face. "You already have." She smiled through tears. "Because you came back to me." She helped him to his feet. Before the entire kingdom, she wrapped her arms around him. Thunderous applause filled the throne room. Even the oldest nobles wiped tears from their eyes. Months passed. Peace returned to Silver Fang once again. The missing portraits were restored to the royal gallery. Their letters returned to the archives. The wedding painting once again hung in its rightful place. One quiet evening, Zevian and Nyra returned to the western garden, overlooking the lake. The white moon lilies bloomed exactly as they had years before. Zevian stopped beneath the old oak tree. Their initials, Z+N, were still carved into the bark. He smiled. "I remember carving these." Nyra laughed. "And I remember pretending to be angry." "You weren't pretending." "No." She smiled mischievously. "But your kiss changed my mind." Zevian laughed. "So my charm still works." "It always has." He gently took her hand. "You know, I thought losing my memories was the worst thing that could happen." Nyra looked at him. "What changed?" He gazed into her eyes. "I realized something." "What?" "I didn't fall in love with you because I remembered you." He gently kissed her forehead. "I remembered you because I never stopped loving you." Nyra smiled as tears of happiness filled her eyes. Together they watched the sunset reflect across the peaceful lake. The kingdom was safe. The traitor had fallen. Their love had survived even forgotten memories. And from that day forward, whenever the people of Silver Fang told the story of Alpha King Zevian and Queen Nyra, they didn't remember the night he lost his memory. They remembered the woman who loved him enough to help him find his way home. Thank you for spending your time with Zevian and Nyra's story. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe, like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and click the notification bell so you never miss our next emotional story. See you in the next one.